attendees can start joining, and we're auto recording. And so I think it's interesting. We've got people coming in. So it's a little different, Nan, the way I have it set up on the other account and this one. This one I like because it just drops everybody in. So we have people coming in the door. So welcome, everybody. My name is Laura. Welcome to Afternoons with AzTEA. This is an amazing crew that we have this month. We are going to be talking EdTech coaching. And I will tell you from the planning that we've been doing in the backstage before we all started talking, we couldn't get our words in enough because we all have so many thoughts and so many great ideas around EdTech coaching in Arizona. So we are going to just dive right in. The first thing but before we get started, know that a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to go for 45 to 50 minutes just in conversation, but that doesn't mean you can't be part of the conversation. Please feel free to drop questions, thoughts, comments, emojis, all sorts of cool stuff in the chat. Talk to each other. Emily is going to be in the chat navigating things and dropping some great links for you as we are moving through our time together. So be sure to join us and participate. This will also be posted on YouTube and on the AzTEA channel afterwards, so that you'll be able to AzTEA website, I apologize, and the channel, AzTEA channel, so you'll be able to come back and watch this later. It'll be posted on LinkedIn, Facebook, and other social as well. So the point is, you can't get away from us. We're going to be there. Jack is in the background in case anybody wants to, get a little puppy love. He's there. And I'm not going to do like a round robin of introducing everybody, but we are going to drop profiles in there. And then as you jump in to join the conversation, each of you just introduce who you are, what you do, and where you're from. Does that sound okay? Okay, very cool. So our first, I don't even know where to begin because we've got so many great topics to talk about today. But one of the things that we began with was talking when we got together today is all of us came into EdTech at a different period of time. And so we've had some, different interactions and different experiences, but there's some common threads that we've found are running through this. Now, I got into EdTech in 2009, I was telling everybody. And it was funny because I was doing a training in Vail, Emily, and I asked who's been in EdTech, longer than me. And now it's only like 2 people in the room. It used to be like the whole room, but I'm not going to ask that question anymore because was like kind of sad that it was literally 2 people. So anyway, came in about 2009. I was saying I was hired to do an iPad rollout. Prior to that, I had been working, I was a teacher. I was a tech teacher. And because people assume that because I could teach technology, I knew how to do technology. And I will tell you, I didn't. One of my first questions that I asked somebody one time, they said, so do something about your IP address. And I said, what's an IP address? And they said, first of all, don't ever ask that question out loud again, because, but I didn't know what it was. But I was brought into a role assuming that I knew what I was doing. So that was prior to, Diana, don't worry, prior to the coming in as the iPad rollout management job. But it was truly, I think a lot of us come in from the classroom without the experience. Just because you can do one thing doesn't necessarily mean you can do the others. So tell us a little bit, anybody who wants to jump in. I came in 2009, did some iPad rollouts. I've been district level, and I've been site level, and seen a lot of really exciting changes over time. One of the things that we talked about was it used to be very isolated, that you would be teaching people how to use technology because it was initially coming in. It wasn't ubiquitous yet. And so we were able to maintain a little bit separation from curriculum and all of that. But over time, that's evolved, right? And so anybody jump in and tell us what you're thinking.
So I'll jump in. So I'm Ashley Esparza. I'm the Technology and Innovation Specialist in Flagstaff Unified. And we live up here in the beautiful snowy mountains of Flagstaff. And so I totally would just want to echo what you said, Laura. I think that when our district first had a technology, I can't even remember what the role is, but a technology probably a technology specialist might have been the first title or something along those lines, which was almost 20 years ago. they were really supporting like those first interactive Promethean boards and a couple of Mac desktops in schools, right? So it was really a role to support the hardware. And similar to what you said, that role originally was expected to know all of the same things that our technical services would know. But that person was a teacher. So they were coming in from a very different perspective. Um, so then fast forward, to now, my experience was also similar, and much it was within the last 10 years. I started as more of a makerspace coordinator for a school. So it was still like, how do you work these little robots? How do you make these things work and connect them? And while teaching in FUSD, we went one-to-one. So it was like, oh, every student has an iPad. Well, how do we do that? How does that work when you have
Right.
a district of over 8,000 students? So it's just been interesting to watch, like, here's our needs with hardware and devices to now, a whole pandemic later, we're now looking at what are the best practices for teaching and learning when we use these devices.
Yeah.
I want to piggyback on what you guys said too. I'm Sapani Tipke. I'm an instructional technology specialist in Chandler Unified. And I've been in this role for about 4 years now. Prior to that, I was actually introduced into technology and becoming a technology teacher, which I think is interesting because as a district, we decided, hey, our students need digital skills. They need digital literacy, which we started that, I want to say maybe 2015. So we rolled that out into every single one of our elementary school sites. But what we didn't realize was that we were focused on our student population, but not necessarily our teacher population. Because as soon as you're saying, hey, our students need digital literacy, we completely forgot or did not consider that, hey, we really need to invest in time on educating our staff beyond teachers, even, our front office staff and classified staff. So COVID kind of pushed us fast forward into that. And so since then, as being working at the district level right after COVID, we are now saying, hey, we need to actually move them together and parallel the learning with our students and our staff. So this whole concept of coaching and training has to go hand in hand. So that's kind of my journey and kind of where we are in Chandler right now.
I love how different everybody's experiences are. What about Vale? What do you guys got going on over there?
So my name's Suzanne Brazel, and I'm the site tech coordinator at a K-8 school called Esmond Station down here. I started teaching kind of later in my life, and I figured I might as well get a master's while I was on the school path, and I got my EdTech master's in about 2010 from NAU. Loved it. Then when the job of the site tech coordinator came available, I went for it, and it was just, my job is really just anything that plugs in, it's my job to keep going. But I always had a passion for ed tech. And so then when COVID happened, because we've always had literacy coaches, math coaches, cognitive coaches, and then we realized that nobody really knew how to teach with tech when COVID happened, and all of a sudden we were doing it. So with Emily Marshall's support and a team of great educators, we developed an ed tech coaching program for Vale. So.
Well, and it's interesting to me, and then Roxy, I want to ask what you guys have going on, but one of the coolest things was I did a site visit, and I know I've told this story, but I did a site visit to Vale, and when Emily and I walked in, I think the question we asked you, Suzanne, was like, show us what lights you up, right? I think that was exactly what it was. And I will tell you that, like I've said before, she didn't show us a device. She didn't show us an access point. She didn't show us anything that plugged in, where she says her job is everything that plugged in. She shows the results of all of the opportunities that technology connection and resources have brought to her site. So, she gets the big picture, and she's able to, she's site level. So she's able to bring that to people every single day to help them make that connection. And I know, like, I always thought that was cool. I was a district coach, district level. And at one point I was covering like literally over 20 schools, and you can't have that impact. And I know we're all going to talk about that, but yeah, Suzanne, I just thought it was so much fun when I really expected to be like in the server room, and instead we were like getting to see the tortoise and how cool he was and learn about tortoise babysitting and all sorts of cool stuff like that. So anyway, it's a joy, absolute joy, so much fun. Roxy, what do you guys have going on?
Yeah, so I'm Roxy Thompson. I'm the lead instructional technology coach for Peoria Unified, and this is my first year. It's a brand new role. So part of what's been exciting is just they made it pretty clear when I came on that I was going to have some good, comfortable room to kind of make this position what I wanted because it didn't exist before. So that's come with some challenges, but honestly, by far, just mostly like really exciting opportunities to kind of shape this. But prior to this, I was in the Washington Elementary School District for 4 years as an EdTech coach. And even though when I got brought on, the word coach was in my title, it really had been more of a traditional trainer role. I think there was some movement to try to make it more coachy. That was also the year of the COVID lockdown. That was my very first year. So they were actually going to get rid, for budgeting purposes, of my role. I was already looking for new jobs, and then all of a sudden lockdown happened, and they were like, "Hey, wait a minute, maybe we'll keep you around for like a little while longer."
I could use you. Yeah.
Yeah, so then everyone was at home, and that's when I kind of stumbled onto the Google Certified Coach program. It was kind of like in the search of like, what is this? If I'm going to be here for another year at least, like, what does this even mean? Like, I don't get what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't understand what this looks like when you're doing it well. Like, I don't know that I have a great model of technology coaching. And there happened to be a group of other coaches that kind of put together their own little cohort to go through the Google Certified Coach program together. And that was honestly just like where I started to learn like what structured coaching looks like. And it was really awesome. So ever since then, I really wanted to have something similar, another group, where we could talk about what we were doing and what it looked like in our different contexts in our different districts.
Love it. And in a little bit, I'll ask you about what you're doing in that arena so that you can share that out, right? Because I think most of us, and y'all can jump in and say whether you agree or not, I think most of us have like felt our way like into these roles, or we were, like I said, I was dropped into this, when I, heard when I was put into the role, there were people that I knew that laughed. They're like, really? You're the best one for this. And I was like, I guess I am. So we figure it out, because we adapt, we figure it out, we make it happen. But most of us do not walk in with a job description, right? And that's something that over the past 15, 20 years or whatever, we haven't seen change too much. Or if we come in, the description doesn't necessarily match what we end up really doing or what we're doing. So what is it, maybe let's dive into, I know we wanted to talk about a little bit about what's the difference between a trainer and a coach, because we do training as a coach, but coaching is very different. And I think one of the things that Roxy said that made me squirrel a little bit into this was you had said you weren't sure what structured coaching looked like and what to do and, the models to use and that type of thing. And I know I never, up until probably 5 years ago, used any sort of structured coaching models. I just got in there and, just figured it out. But the idea of, making people feel safe and then moving forward from there. But do you guys come in with a lot of structured experience, or did you just figure it out, feel your way? And if so, how'd that happen?
What's interesting is I agree with you because it feels like a little chaos at first. And so then you're always striving for something that provides more structure. And then what happens, especially in our district, is you're provided a lot of structure. So then you can go into a lot of different models. So, we've gone through training with Jim Knight, and then we've gone through training with cognitive coaching. And then a few of us in our ed tech role have jumped into Apple professional coaching. And Roxy, you had mentioned like the Google track. I think what it comes down to is you have to see what is going to work. And if it's pulling pieces of different parts from different coaching styles or programs and kind of developing what works for you and what works for your, I guess you could say, coachee, whether it's your site or your district. If it's like over here in Chandler, we have regions. You kind of have to develop that style. And it's so nice to be in a district that does give you a lot of structures that you can pull from. But in the end, I feel you have to pick pieces that make it work for you.
I absolutely love what you said about what works for your coachee. because I think that is the difference between coaching and giving PD. Because when PD, you're just giving out information and you're hoping that it sticks. And in coaching, you are making it personal and you're getting it to work for them. And that's your whole role.
A little bit more
Yeah.
like bilateral. Yeah. Ashley, go
To
ahead.
build on that, also, I think PD is kind of just like you said, Suzanne, like it's like one size fits all. Here's this information, here's this structure or way of doing things, versus coaching is, you know, I think my take on it is you're trying to empower that individual to grow, right? And to make their own decisions and to reflect on their own processes.
Yeah, I also think there's like a really big difference between training and PD, right? Like a training session and a PD session. And I sometimes think that we do a disservice to all of us, like those people giving it and the people on the receiving end, by kind of using those terms interchangeably, because then you don't really know what you're coming into. And as a facilitator and a designer, you don't really know what you're supposed to be designing for. Because like to me, PD, which I enjoy designing and facilitating, that should model whatever best practices you want to see in your classroom, right? So like, for example, we're having a lot of conversations here because in our strategic plan, we talk about blended learning. Like we want to see best practices in blended learning in our classrooms. And so really we had a lot of conversations in the beginning of the year of like, we're not going to get there unless we start to model that in our PD. Like whatever best practices in blended learning we want to see in the classroom, like we all have to be on the same page. Those are our little classrooms, right? Like when I go to design a PD, I use a very similar like lesson plan that I used to use for the classroom. Like I still think through, you know, my different sub-objectives and activities, because I want that to show teachers the design flow and take those different pieces and how do these things all work together. So I do think sometimes when we use training and PD interchangeably, I think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot sometimes with that. Those should be distinct.
I think
You're
that's a
so
great point.
right. You're so right. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how many times as specialists or coaches or whatever title you have, we're telling what best practices are as an educator with students, yet we do the opposite and with as soon as we have teachers as our students as opposed to kids. It's like information overload, and you know you would never do that to a child in your room, yet we're also doing that to teachers. And half the time, these are teachers that have worked a full day and they're going into PD after their full day. So if anything, we should not be giving them information overload and actually make it model that experience. You're absolutely right.
And relevant to what they need at that time. And then we can do a whole nother webinar on engagement, right? So when we are looking at, actually, I'm wondering, Diana, do you have any thoughts, or do you want me to? You just have so many good things. Diana comes from a totally different perspective, right? She works with and sees the coaches, and she's made some great points about, you know what, I'm trying to hide my dog right now. Diana, do you have any thoughts right now, or should I come back to you later? Because I do have a question that I can go to.
Not so much about the difference between teaching and coaching, but I will, when you were first talking about how things, and I'm going to date myself, but back in 98, 99, we were just building the network here at Dysart, and it was all about teaching staff how to use the technology. So actually our campus techs, who are not educators, you know, they're campus techs, we're going in classrooms trying to show staff and teachers how to use the technology. And then it was, wait a minute, how do you integrate the technology? And the campus techs would go, I don't know, I can tell you how to connect it. I can tell you all the workings behind the wall. I don't know how you're going to integrate, you know, this device into your math class or whatever. So that's kind of started. Then we hired trainers in IT, and I'm talking like 2 for the whole district to try to get out there. And it just kind of evolved. And like I was saying in the pre-meeting that we ended up having tech specialists, teachers, you know, teachers with a stipend at every campus to help them integrate. Then we had integration ambassadors, and then now we have teaching and learning specialists, where now it's even evolved from just how to integrate to other supports for teachers. So that I've seen it grow from where just how to use this computer. This is how you turn it on, and this is how you print, and thinking that that was enough support back then at the time, and finding out it was not. And it's just, and as we get more technology, I think it's gotten easier because now the graduates with teacher degrees have used technology in college, and that's a big difference. So I don't think there's that hurdle, but now there's so much more wonderful things you can do using technology as a tool and not as something, another subject that needs to be learned. Does that make sense? So I've also seen the labs. Everybody sits in rows and they learn how to use this computer and how to use the software. And now labs are gone because everybody's one-to-one and they're in the classroom. So I just want to say I love the evolution. I love everything that you guys do in this group, because it helps us in IT, because we love the latest and greatest and newest stuff that comes out, and you guys are the ones that are fight for that. And I do appreciate everything that you guys do. But I just wanted to kind of just say, I have seen that evolution from the 90s till now, and it's great. It's a lot of work and it's not done. So that's all. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. I know I kept my overhead. I can date myself right along with you because I held tight to my overhead projector until somebody like literally ripped it out of my hands. They hid the transparencies and the bulbs. And I think it was when my last bulb burnt out that I was like, why do I need a smart board?
It's
got my
hard to
overheads.
remember that. I remember when the teachers were used to doing their attendance, and they'd have a runner go up to the front
Oh my
with the
goodness. Yeah.
attendance. And then when we're like, no, it's all automated. Like, what? No. But now you think, how did we ever function like that back then? Because it's, now we're just taking off to even quicker later. I mean, latest and greatest. So
I had a moment of joy. I think it was, anyway, it was at one point when the internet went out and the teachers were unhappy.
yeah.
Like that was a transition point when they were unhappy that the internet went out. You know what I mean? And it was now, of course, but back that, for a long time, it didn't matter. They were like, that's fine,
I have
So
sleep over that. That's why I've been also worrying about the internet going out. So
exactly. Yeah. So as coaches, we talk about a lot of different things, but what do you feel like, or what do you want when you walk into, or, when your coaches or whoever walk into a classroom, what's the biggest thing that we feel like we bring? Because yes, we bring tech support, even though we're not, that's sometimes a fine line that we tread, right? I remember people being like, don't fix things, but you're sitting in front of them and their printer's not, and you can fix it, but it's not anyway. But what are we bringing to the table? Like, what is unique and special about coaches that they bring as they walk into the environment? What do you guys think?
I think one of the greatest things that we can bring into a coaching partnership is a thought partner. It's always nice to have another person to engage in conversation about what we're doing, and that has the same goal in terms of how are we going to improve the practices for our students? How are we going to give them greater voice and choice, and still hold them to high expectations? And sometimes teachers feel isolated and they're kind of alone. They may not always have a team, so just having another person be a thought partner with them and that's willing to work with them and go through the trials and the celebrations is kind of a big deal. And that just, you got to kind of start building those relationships and the trust. And I don't know about you, but I love being able to discuss something I'm working on with another colleague, and my ideas can get better, they can get worse, they can change. All of it, it just kind of evolves into something better than what it was when it was just one person.
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback off that, I think bringing in that personalized support that you don't, like we talked about, the difference between a PD or a training and a coach is I am now providing that personalized support where I'm taking your strengths, I'm taking, all the things that you're bringing, your skills, your context, what's going on in your classroom, what are your learning goals, and I'm helping you to start become a problem solver and see that pathway forward. And like Sapani said, being a cheerleader, I went to this session at FETC and it was about empathetic tech coaching and about failure and just what happens in your brain when you have failed at something, and the need for tech coaches to help rewire that. And he compared it to teaching a baby how to walk. He's like, when babies take their first steps, you don't go hey, stupid baby, you're walking backwards, right? You cheer for everything. You're like, oh my gosh, you stood up. oh my gosh, you took a step. And like that is the approach that he brings to tech coaching, because he wants to rewire teachers' brains that have had a really negative experience and that are now scared of failing in front of people, scared of not being part of the rest of the group that seems like they've figured it out, and now I'm the only one. And it was really interesting, but it just reminded me of how important it is to celebrate every single little step that someone makes, no matter how small, because that's a big moment. And then they associate that happiness with you, right? Then they would like you to be around more because like they remember that they had that moment of success. So
Yeah, I think that's something unique that coaches bring is they're there for the whole process, right? Which both Stefani and Roxy alluded to. So they're there to help you plan and be that thought partner. And sometimes, I get to be in the room as a lesson is happening, whether it's going exactly as intended or not at all as intended. And that's so unique because a lot of teachers, they have their grade level team, their community that they meet with later, not while the instruction is happening. And I think it's so powerful to have someone there with you throughout all of it, because you create this really unique bond where you have this experience that's shared and you can talk about it and come back to it. And yeah, it's a great opportunity for growth for both people in that relationship too. Because I think as coaches, we don't always talk about what we're learning in those situations as educators and teachers. And that's so unique that you really, you don't get that in other contexts because you're also there in this non-evaluative, non-judgmental way. So most of the time, so many of our teachers, the only time someone else, another adult, is in their room is either to support specific students or they're there evaluating what they're doing. And so that's pretty unique.
I think being a partner with them and letting them experiment doing things that are totally outside of their comfort level, and then they see that it works, or they see that the kids get excited. And I love being in the classroom watching that also, just because then it's like they took a risk, it paid off, and they can see how beneficial it was, and they can really reflect on that afterwards. Because that reflection, I think helping teachers reflect after a lesson, whether good or bad, is super powerful too.
I know we're
And
talking about celebrating, and
Mhm.
and those are wonderful. Another thing I feel is that we have to honor the failures too, and not and you could also even celebrate the failures, because that, number one, it builds a trusting relationship between the two of you, in terms of saying, hey, we can celebrate together, but we could also fail together. And then the hardest part there, which is like what I call the sweet spot, is then now turning that failure into grit and perseverance and saying, okay, so that didn't work well. And now you're not alone in this, like, oops, like, pivot, I need to change that. Well, I just had that earlier today in a third grade class, but we worked through it together, so it didn't really feel like a failure, even though we know it wasn't our intended goal, and you had someone experience it with you, so it wasn't that scary. And then it just makes it a little bit better the next time, and then the next time.
I loved, I used to, when I taught math, I used to celebrate when kids would get an answer wrong, because we learned something then, right? If everybody gets the answer right all the time, nobody's learning and nobody's growing. But it's when they get it wrong and they get something explained to them or they work it out, that's when you really should be celebrating, right? And it's kind of the same with, you have a teacher that's terrified to use technology, when even if it fails and they can still get the lesson done, then it's a success for sure.
I'm trying not to jump in because I want to say so many things, but you guys are saying such great things. One of the things that, and now I'm going to say it anyway, one of the things that was so cool that I learned as a coach, was somebody said to me, they're like, one of the benefits that we bring to the table is you can't see the picture from inside the frame. So we bring that outside, you're able to bring an outside perspective that can't be seen, because I think like what Sapani said, like, and Ashley, I think you mentioned it too. A lot of us, I don't think, understand how siloed teachers are. If we're talking specifically to teachers, like there can be days where, you know, weeks, whatever, where they don't see another adult. throughout the day, you know, except for, like you said, the specialist that comes in, or, you know, when you're crossing, you're dropping your kids at lunch, or, you know, when you're running to the restroom. There are people who do take the, you know, their lunch and they go and interact with other humans, but that doesn't always happen. And so also our worlds are very small, right? So if we're mostly spending time with our, you know, grade level team, or with those on our team, if we're at, you know, secondary or whatever, we're only getting their opinions, thoughts, and feelings. And so having some fresh air come into the room, what a beautiful thing that we can bring, you know.
Yeah,
And
oh, sorry, I'm sorry. One of the things I sometimes think about, because when I first started using tech as a teacher, it was right when like Twitter was like the Twitter, you know, education and ed tech stuff was like really just getting going. So back when like Matt Miller and Casey Bell, if anyone knows those names, Alice Keeler were just starting to become like edge celebrities. And I, you know, would post a lot on Twitter about what I was doing in my classroom, and, you know, some of the lessons that I was doing or activities other people had shared that I tried. And I used to sometimes sit there in my classroom and think like there are people across the country, across the world that know more about what's going on in my classroom than like the person next door. Because like that wasn't shared in my school, that wasn't shared in my district. There was no one going around, you know, taking snapshots and like, you know, or anything like that. And I think like it's really challenging, but if we can find ways to really recognize people that are doing really awesome things in their classroom in a way that is comfortable for them, because not everyone wants to, you know, their picture to get blasted on social media. But if we can
Right.
find those people and recognize them in ways that they really appreciate, that would really help kind of build that community in your school, because you're right, you don't get to see your next door neighbor's classroom a whole lot.
when we are walking into other people's classrooms. So Sapani, tell us what you mean when you said, don't move their couch.
I love this metaphor. And it was actually, I I do. My colleague, who is our assistive technology specialist in our district, shared it with me, and it was one of those light bulb moments that was like, oh. But she said, she asked me how I would feel if someone came to my house and said, "Your couch really needs to be moved over there." And I was like, "Well, first of all, that's not cool." And she's like, "You're right. Look at all these emotions you're feeling because number one, I came into your space and I'm telling you what you have in your space that's wrong." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Well, when we go into a classroom, we're doing that. So don't do that. When you're going to someone's classroom, that is their space and their home. And often it is actually where they spend more time than their actual home. And then if we start pointing out things that they're not doing, quote unquote, right, we're creating this whole like vortex of emotions with them, just like you were feeling if someone came and said, move your couch, or like you said, Laura, change your curtains, or, you know, change your whole motif. Whatever it is, you have to understand that when you're going to a classroom, there's emotions involved. So if you go in and say, hey, you're not doing this right, let's change it and do something else, you're not going to get the intended response, and you're actually defeating the goal and making it harder for both of you. So don't go in and change the couch. What you want to do is build those relationships and time. Go in and sit on their couch. Go in and experience it. Get the feel of the vibe of their house or classroom. And then together with time, you guys decide, hey, maybe there is a better place for the couch, but you can't come in yourself and do that. It has to be a discussion you have together, and it has to be a decision that they also make with your assistance and with your help. So try to avoid those emotions and don't move their couch.
Don't move. Absolutely. And sometimes we do have there's a couple of cool things about the role of a coach. One, like Ashley mentioned, is usually they're non-evaluative. And so there is a real opportunity for relationship development that doesn't happen in other roles. And I think when I was a district coach and I go in, a lot of the admins, like, you know, we're talking about teachers, but admins as well, the principals, a lot of times they don't have anybody to really talk to in the same way because you're busy leading, they're leading a campus, right? And so there's a number of times where you end up in a really great way, like spending some time just having like a little coffee session, because that emotional support or that safe space that we create is so valuable. It's not necessarily about let me fix your computer, but you know what? Why don't I come in and like, I don't know, well, update something while we talk. You know what I mean? So that we can make that happen. But what do we do? And nobody knew this question was coming, so I want to hear I'm interested to see what we say. But we are often time bound. You know, like Sapani just said, like we often have time to establish that relationship, but we also sometimes have shifts, changes, deliverables that need to happen. And I know we think about like back to school PD, right? And I'm going to use the PD term. I should be saying training, Roxy, right? We have training that we have to do when we come back, but also sometimes we have development that we're doing where we're trying to shift culture, but we have to do it fast, right? You have a whole new system that's coming in, you know, let's say we change the grade book, like, you know, or we're going to standards-based grading, or we are, you know, we're making some sort of change, we're bringing something new in. How do we do that fast, effectively, and do that relationship development at the same time? Because it's going to be the coaches that's falling onto, right? What do you guys think? And how
I
do we
think
model
that's
that?
I think that'd be similar to looking at our class of students. We have to differentiate. And whether we say it's training or professional development, we need to provide options. I work with plenty of teachers that are just give me the facts, give me the data, give me bullets, maybe snapshots, arrows, and short 1 2 minute video clips, and that's all I'm going to need. And for the majority of people, that's going to work. But then we're going to have teachers that need a little bit more of that one-on-one, and that relationship building and that trust and going through something new together. So in that sense, you try to save time in some areas by gaining it to knowing where you need to invest your time into this certain staff and this certain site. So I tell teachers all the time, we can never fight time. It's our insanity loop if we keep trying to. But what we have to do is how do we use our time more wisely? So if we differentiate, say, hey, we can do some of this training asynchronous for that crowd of people that are like, just give it to me asynchronous, gold. Then if we can do it a little bit more tailored, and then we're doing like one-on-one PD, small group PD, that's going to work too. And just give them options.
Yeah, I think again, this is how coaching is so personalized because it's really going to depend on the individual you're coaching. And I think in working with teachers, there are some teachers who they want support at the front end of a cycle, right? Like they're like, I have no idea where to start. I have no resources. I don't have any information on this. So they need support planning and they need those resources to learn more about something versus there's others that are just like, I'm so scared to try this out with students. Like, I'm so nervous that it's just going to fail and I don't want to look like a failure in front of them. Can you be there and be that hands-on support? And then there's others who just love that reflect step, right? They just want to talk about how did it go? How am I going to do this next time? What are all the ways I want to change this? How will this trickle into these other units I'm planning, et cetera? And so I think, it's hard to do that for everyone with something like a lift of we're starting the school year and we all have to do this. But I think having that approach of, well, what does each person need? And being able to ask them and get that information can help you make everyone feel supported, because it's the opposite of what so many of us have experienced, which is we're all going to go sit in this room all day for 8 hours and we're going to hear 3 people talk all day with a few breaks and 1 lunch, even though everyone in the room is thinking about like, well, I need to do this for tomorrow and I need to make these copies and I need to prep this, So not to say that's totally terrible all the time, but they're kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum, I think.
Just need work in my classroom. Yeah, right?
My principal is very against professional development at staff meetings. Like, staff meetings are for information. We might do a few little icebreakers, but not necessarily PD. I've started, we have a student achievement teacher at every site and they do data teams every 2 weeks. And once a month I go in and I sit all day with her and meet with individual grade bands. And that's where I kind of introduce topics, introduce things, and then get a feel for who needs me to go in and do more. So it's been really successful. I used to try to entice people to come to learn things with chocolate, and gift cards, and they didn't really care after school. And I don't blame them, right? They're done. But they already have to be there to get the data. And so then it's just, if I just tag on, I can do a little bit, and it's a great way to actually make those connections with them.
Yeah, I think in a PD setting, like Ashley and Sapani mentioned, it's just like a lot of personalization as much as possible. Like we have a Canvas rollout this year. And so we've got teachers in K12 using it. They're using it at different levels. They came in with different experience because some of them used it as students, like in college, right? So every time there's a PD where it is a group of teachers that are all over the place, like all I try to do is to create different pathways so that they can decide what things they want to focus on. So they might not all come out learning the exact same things, but they're all going to come out like a tiny step ahead of where they came in. And honestly, I mean, I think that's about as much as you can do with a group of like very diverse learners, is just to try to make it as relevant as possible, by some creative design work, and so that they are getting what they need.
Yeah, you hit on something so important, Roxy, which is trusting them to kind of drive their learning too. And I think that's an important piece in coaching, is again coming back to trust in that relationship.
Looking at Emily, it looked like she was about to say something. No? You're good? Okay. I think the cool thing that the thread that's weaving through this whole thing is safety, right? Everybody going in with the goal of making people feel safe, holding that space where they feel safe, taking risks, taking chances, trying new things, asking questions, feeling free to fail, feeling free to try new things, knowing that somebody's got their back, that somebody's supporting them, that they're trusting them, that they're trusted to know what they need. Like, how cool is that, Ashley, that you said that, and Roxy's talking about helping to create defined pathways that people can support and choose their own learning. And it parallels very much what we talk about with students, right? Because people are people, humans are humans. And then speaking to Roxy, what you were talking about the concept of the neural pathways and the brain safety, right? And celebrating, creating those neural connections that are going to take change and bringing it to something positive and exciting, as opposed to something scary, because, we could go into the neuroscience of it. Like, all of these changes, we are automatically programmed just in order to not be eaten by a bear, chased by a tiger, whatever. It doesn't matter. As humans, we are just just physiologically programmed to say, no, thanks, I'm good. I'm still here. And so we're just going to leave it at that. And a lot of times we ask teachers to try new things that they're doing in isolation because maybe their peers aren't doing it. And, the whole thing, you don't want to get kicked out of the tribe. You get kicked out of the tribe, go live on it, you starve, and end up dead. So that's what our brains are thinking. So every single one of you are talking about how we bring that safe space. And I absolutely love that. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages and benefits to having coaches in the space, because they are the ones that can specifically dedicate themselves to helping people do that. Right. So I don't know. What other advantages do you all see to having coaches in the space? Because they are roles that, how many got pulled to because we needed to, right, to teach during COVID, right? We didn't hold our coaches to do the work that they really needed to do at a time when they were super needed to do the work and support the teachers. But, so what kind of other things are we finding to be benefits of having coaches in the environment, as I try to figure out what she's doing? Anybody want to jump on that?
I have one comment, and I haven't coached. Suzanne is one of our great coaches in Vail. But one of the things I see happening lately is that we've been talking for years about high quality technology integration, and it never clicked until recently that like our principals and our administrators don't know what that means. They haven't been through an ISTE cert training or looked at the EdTech standards, and so they don't know what it could look like. And so the whole time I was like, I have this vision that's so important. Why aren't we doing it? Why don't you guys get it? And now I think we're starting to see movement where people are seeing the benefit. And I think they see the benefit more often when people like Suzanne and Roxy and Ashley and Sapani went into classes and made that difference for a teacher, and had the teachers see the difference, and then the teachers talk to each other, and just it builds when they see what could be happening but isn't happening because we don't have coaches, and especially those full-time coaches.
That's totally happening at this elementary site that I'm working with right now. We're working specifically with a specific grade level. So let's say third grade, right? So this was the goal of the principal, saying, I want to work with third grade. I want to move it to this next level with tech integration. And so, we started the process. We're building the relationships and getting in there, and it's going great. And then out of the blue, which was totally not intended, but received a few emails from fifth grade and sixth grade saying, hey, I see what's happening and I'd like to try it. And we're like, yeah, let's do this. So it's that ripple effect, because you don't really know what can be there, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't see. So until they start to see even a small glimpse of what is possible, then that just ripples and it ends up happening into multiple grade levels, which is awesome. So it definitely, when they see it, they definitely want to jump on board.
And
Yeah, I think
so,
oh,
go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry. I was gonna say one thing Emily mentioned that made me think is like the role that coaches play in, it's one thing to have a vision or something in your, strategic plan of what you want teachers doing with technology or what it should look like. But it's really like coaches that are on the ground having those conversations that are like making that vision really come to life, right? By like using that vocabulary and by like constantly like talking about what it is that makes technology integration effective. And so getting everyone on the same page is a huge challenge. And the bigger the district, the bigger the challenge, I think. And making sure that when everyone says effective technology integration, you're all thinking the same thing. And I think that's really challenging, and that's really an important role for coaches.
You want to use that as a segue to go into talking about the work that is happening in Arizona around that? Would you be willing to dive into that, Roxy, and share a little bit?
As far as the coaches?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we have a brand new little group called the AZ EdTech Coaches Community. It's kind of a spinoff of the AZ EdTech Leaders, which Alicia Henderson from ADE has organized, which is an amazing group also. But this has sort of been a little dream of mine. And at first I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I was the only one that wanted to hang out with a bunch of other coaches. But it turned out there was a lot of people that wanted to hang out with other coaches. So we had our first meeting in February. It was awesome. I was just like nerding out the whole time that people were there. And yeah, my hope is that, short term that we get to have a regular group that's meeting and collaborating and learning about each other's context. But one of the things we talked about, is we did adopt the AzTEA standards for students, basically, right, as our AZ EdTech standards. There are also AzTEA standards for coaches. And so to me, it makes a lot of sense that we really try to start aligning what we're doing and kind of grounding it in that set of standards. I think that's helpful for us as coaches so that we know what this role looks like and what best practices are. Then it's also helpful to help define that role for everyone else in the district, right? So that everyone's on the same page about what you do. And hopefully if we can identify some common areas where we feel like we need professional development ourselves, that's something that, we can organize or maybe find, some sort of outside group that can provide that. Like, how do you design really good PD for adult learners? Or, how do you have difficult coaching conversations? So, yeah, that's my grand hope long term for this group. But I'm super excited that people wanted to hang out with each other and talk to each other about coaching.
I know we can find the information on that, like on LinkedIn, on Facebook, but can you also, do you have the link where you can drop it before we end this call today or finish up our conversation so that people can dive in? Because I know the idea of creating some standards, best practices, whatever we want to call them, because we have standards and I was trying to think of a different word to use, but that are cross-pollinating. Like, how great is that? Because like we're talking about in our conversation, every single one of us have had such a different experience, right? And I know that Diana and Emily, Diana looked up, she's like, what? Responsible for creating a cohort through AzTEA COSIN. We've been doing some work with leaders, right? We've got a CETL cohort where we have about 27 EdTech leaders who are all working together to earn their CETL certification. And one of the things we talk about is, it's funny, we were talking about this before, change management comes up, right? And knowing how to navigate change, and we're all doing it together. And so we have 16 or 17 districts represented in that group. I can't remember. I looked up the number the other day. I counted. But now each one of those is going to go back with this conversation. And how cool is that? So Roxy, I think the work that you're doing in that area and that ADE is doing, it can only help us to bring the new standards in, right? And ISTE the same way. So I forgot what I was going to say, but somebody talk while I figure out where my brain was going, because I had a thought, but it went away. So jump in and tell me what you're thinking.
I'm just excited about this EdTech or the coaches group that Roxy spearheaded, because we talk about teachers being in isolation, but we are too. We're kind of isolated in our realms, but regardless of you being in a small district or a large district, it is always nice to have another person to bounce ideas from, to know that we're not alone, and to kind of learn from each other and grow from each other. So thank you for creating this group. It's definitely nice not to be isolated.
I think AzTEA does it. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I dropped the links in. I'm not sure if everyone can see them though. It looks like mine only goes to hosts and panelists. I'm sorry. I'm such a
Seeing it.
Zoom.
It's looking good. So
I'm helpless in Zoom.
I'll make sure while Suzanne chats.
I just think AzTEA and ISTE do a good job of providing opportunities to grow also, not always at the most convenient times, but as far as ISTE goes, I feel like, but I think there are opportunities. It's just hard sometimes to find them to keep growing.
And I know that's work we're doing in AzTEA, right? To try to make those more visible, right? And I think, like everybody's been saying here, like we need to customize them as well to the way that people can best receive or be capable of it, right? I know that we used to joke, but we were only half joking during COVID, where wanted t-shirts that said, bet you wish you went to my PD now, like, because now all of a sudden we were very much in demand. It was absolutely lovely at the time to be in demand, not the whole, you know what I mean? So anyway, but yeah, so I think we want to do that, and through unifying, through organizing, and I know Roxy, you have big plans, like you're talking about, leveraging the power of the group type thing to, change the face of EdTech at the coaching level. So I think that's pretty cool. So we have about 7 minutes left. What do you guys want to do at that time? So I have some thoughts, but I want to make sure there aren't any unanswered questions or, unexplored. There's a ton of unexplored content, but I want to see where we want to go with this. Does anybody have a thought before I take us in a direction?
Go for it. Take us in a new direction.
Suzanne. Okay. Suzanne, are you thinking? Diana, are you thinking? Got anything? All right, because anything we start now is going to go down a rabbit hole, and we'll be speaking for the next hour and a half. So what I would love to do in the next few minutes, one, if anybody, that's attending has a question, drop it in. But I did ask if anybody who attended, and I know Sapani's got it, if you would bring an interesting object or a favorite quote, something that just lights you up, is meaningful to you in some way. Did anybody do their homework besides Sapani? Woo! Ashley, do you want to dive in and tell us what you got, Roxy? You're like, not it.
Yes, I would love
Ashley?
to. So I brought a quote, and my quote is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And this just resonates, I think, on so many levels, especially after having this conversation with you all, because I think it connects in multiple ways. For one, I think when we think about true professional growth, it's really hard to do that by yourself, and it may not actually be impactful. But when you do it with other people, whether that's your coach or that's your colleagues, it just allows you to have so many more ideas. And like you said earlier, Safani, when you're planning something on your own, it's not necessarily going to grow into the beautiful thing it can be when you're talking about it with other people. And so I feel that way as a coach to teachers and staff, but I also feel like as collective coaches, this is true, right? And we were kind of speaking to that. It's really hard to find opportunities to learn more and talk about coaching and how to grow as a coach. And so I think it's really great that there's some opportunities in Arizona right now to start doing this more. And I'm just really grateful to be here with you all today.
Love it. That's fantastic. Who can top that? I don't know. She just
Well,
kind of killed it.
she did
It's
kind of
funny.
kill it. I will try, although is it really me or is it Will Rogers? Because that's my quote. It is, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. And I see this a lot with myself and also with teachers that I work with is, you know what, I'm on the right track. My students are doing great. Their scores are doing good. There's no complaints. Everything's fine. And it's kind of one of those things when you work with teaching and technology, it's fine until it's not. And we can't really control the not part because those are factors that we have no control of whatsoever. So if you're just on the right track and you just sit there because everything's good, you're still going to get hit and run over somehow. I mean, and it could be just saying, well, like you mentioned, the internet's down, Wi-Fi's down because that's technology. Technology doesn't always work and you have to learn and adapt. But beyond technology, teaching practices, our students change, their needs change, instructional strategies changed depending on which group you have. So it's not a static thing. Education can't be static because society is always evolving and changing. And our job, whether you're a coach or an educator, is to make sure that your students are well prepared for life outside your four walls. It's kind of like, I call it K to life. That should all be our standards. And I stole that from someone from Apple, by the way. I can't say that. Okay, it's not my quote. But that's what I think. Like, you cannot stay sitting down no matter what you're doing, whether you're using technology or you're just talking about taking the same old, I taught this week 1 of last year. So you have to keep moving. You got to stay active.
Okay, this is can you see him? There you go. My armchair counselor that sits on my desk at work. And it helps me remember that I need to listen to people and communicate with them and not just like go full bore with like the facts and the job and that it's a personal thing. So it's a relationship. It's not a job.
Absolutely love that because it is so easy, especially when we're time bound, right? Like, I got 20 minutes. I got no time for your emotions right now. Let's go. But it doesn't work that way. Who else? Who else is bringing something? By the way, Sapani, you must have done great because Jack woke up. Did you see that? He like woke up and perked up when you were sharing
Really?
your quote.
I did
So you
notice
won.
he's not alone now, too.
He's not. He's not. Jack and Delilah are there.
Um,
All right.
I don't have it with me, but I will say Dr. Amy Trout, who most of you know, when I left Washington Elementary, had given me this little turtle because I was constantly getting frustrated at the rate of change or what I felt like was non-change. And she would always try to talk to me about, turtles moving and just like keeping the faith and, celebrating small steps. And so I have that on my desk. But it does remind me that even though there's Dr. Trout, even though, it's easy for me to think about why it's necessary to celebrate really small steps for teachers, I don't know that I always keep that in mind when it comes to like things that we're trying to move up at the district level at like an organizational level. And so sometimes it just feels like nothing is ever going to change and like nothing has moved at all. But it really has, and little steps turn into big movements. So thank you, Dr. Trout.
Dang, these are good. These are really good. All right, we've got a minute and a half. Who else? Anybody? All right, so I'm gonna go. Emily, were you about to talk?
I wasn't, but I also, Roxy made me think of my quote that I think most of you have heard at this point. It was Dr. or Daniel Williamson from COSN was talking to me about change. And when I know you guys have all experienced this, you can see something so clearly and you're like, we need to get to this point and people just aren't getting it. And she just said, Emily, when you're doing that, when you're innovating, you're connecting dots that other people don't even see yet. And so sometimes you need to step back and reevaluate, and you need to show them the dots and then connect the dots and then make sure they see the big picture, because they're not seeing it because they don't see the little dots, let alone the connections. So
Got it. Emily's sticker.
so when you're frustrated, Roxy, which I like that, her telling me that came at a time when I was like, I am very frustrated, and not, so it's like a therapy session. But it is a good
Love it.
perspective to have.
Is that where your connect the dots sticker came from? Was from that
It's
conversation?
not, that was completely different.
Interesting.
That, yeah,
So it's
that quote was like a month ago, and that sticker I think is a couple years old now.
So, okay, so it's a running pervasive theme. Mine is, and it's over my desk, but it's over there. And I think it totally works for this group. It's my biggest regret my biggest regret is staying quiet when my words could make a difference. And I think everybody here, if you don't use your words, then you're doing a disservice, because this has been an absolutely amazing conversation with everybody. So thank you for today. It is exactly 3:00, so I would love for everybody to stick around for just a few minutes, but we're going to formally end our time right now, and then we'll go into our like after party time where we, stop recording and we really get to talk. But thank you everybody for being here today. Afternoons with AzTEA is every third Thursday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. We do record, like I said, you'll have the recordings available. I want to say thank you to every single one of you for giving your time and sharing all of your talent thoughts, all of the wonderful things that you shared out today. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month, joining us to attend, and then y'all come back and we'll talk more. Does that sound good? All right, cool. So big round of applause to everybody. Thank you. Woo, woo, woo. Thank you, everybody who attended. And I am stopping our